In this video from mypokercoaching.com, I am going to reveal to you my top tips to crush 1, 2 live no-limit hold'em cash games. Let's get right to it. Understand that live cash games have the potential to be incredibly profitable. You can win something like 10 big blinds per hour. So at 1 to no limit, you can reasonably expect to win something like $20 per hour if you are a good, strong poker player and you're playing against opponents who regularly make mistakes. And fortunately for you, at the small stakes games, like 1 to no limit, which is often the smallest game that will be available in most live casinos, your opponents will be making all sorts of mistakes. So it is up to you to figure out what your opponents do incorrectly and then exploit them. And if you do this, you will thrive. And to help you do that, we're going to go through a few of my favorite tips today to help you crush these games. Tip number 1 is to 3-bet more often pre-flop before the flop. Many players make the big mistake of only 3-betting with their best hands. Just to be clear, a 3-bet is when you're putting in the third bet. The first bet is the big blind. The second bet is the initial raise. The third bet is a re-raise. So say you're playing 1 to no limit and someone raises to $7. If you want to re-raise, so let's say $20, that would be a 3-bet. A 3-bet says nothing about the size of your re-raise. It says the number that the re-raise is. So if someone raises before the flop and you want to re-raise, that is a 3-bet. Many players make the blunder of only 3-betting with their best hands, and this makes them very easy to play against because when they do put in a 3-bet, they have a really good hand. And if you know your opponent has a really good hand, your life becomes very easy because you just fold everything that's likely to be dominated and continue with hands that have good pot odds and implied odds to try to outdraw your opponent's very strong hands. So instead of 3-betting with only the best hands, which is what a lot of your opponents in small stakes games will do, you're going to want to 3-bet with a strategy such that you are 3-betting with a polarized range from in position and a linear range from out of position. A polarized range means you're 3-betting with your best hands, but then also some hands that are on the cusp of playability. And a linear range is your best hands, but also some hands that are not quite your best, but still very strong. So let's take a look at a scenario first when you are in position. Here is a chart showing how you should play on the button versus a cutoff raise 100 big blinds deep in a cash game. This chart here, by the way, presumes there is no rake. This will be the case in a lot of live cash games in people's homes. Also in casinos where the casino takes their rake in a manner that they take some amount when you enter the casino or every 30 minutes or something like that. If there is a rake taken out of every individual pot, which is the case in some casinos, you're going to have to play tighter than this. Anyway, here's a chart for that scenario with no rake. So you're on the button and the cutoff raises. This is about as loose as you can reasonably be 3-betting against someone who's playing decently well. Of course, if your opponent's making mistakes, make sure you exploit them. The hands in red are re-raising. The hands in green are calling and the hands in blue are folding. Let's take a look at what is re-raising. Notice aces, kings, queens, and ace-king, both suited and offsuit, are 3-betting pretty much every time. Notice jacks and 10s are 3-betting perhaps 40% of the time. And then everything else that is 3-betting is essentially not strong enough to get it all in. But they're 3-betting because they are okay. They're barely playable. Notice the hands that really like to 3-bet. Ace-2 suited, king-7 suited, king-8 suited, queen-9 suited, 10-9 suited, ace-10 offsuit, king-queen offsuit, 6-5 suited. The hands in this region are 3-betting when you are in position. And this is pretty much always going to be the case when you're playing against someone who plays decently well when you are in position. And the reason you don't want to 3-bet hands like ace-jack suited, king-queen suited, queen-10 suited, ace-10 suited, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, pocket 7s, is because when you 3-bet these hands and then your opponent 4-bets you, these hands need to fold. However, they're pretty good. You don't want to go around 3-betting hands that have a lot of equity against your opponent's initial raising range and then have to fold it if your opponent 4-bets. For example, say they make it $7 and then you make it 20 and then they make it 70. You probably have to fold out ace-10 suited, king-queen suited, pocket 7s, etc. And that's a bummer. So you'd rather call those hands. Notice by 3-betting with this strategy, you can easily play for your 100 big blind stack with aces, kings, queens, and ace-king. And then you can fold out all the other stuff besides jacks and tens. These hands are definitely good enough to stick around with. You may notice ace-queen offsuit 3-betting in this scenario, and ace-jack offsuit and ace-10 offsuit. These hands are 3-betting with the intention of folding if your opponent 4-bets. When you are developing this 3-betting strategy, you'll notice that you highly prefer to have a low ace-x suited, a medium king-x suited, or offsuit high cards like ace-queen, king-queen, ace-jack, and ace-10. You may ask, why am I 3-betting hands like ace-10 offsuit and then folding to a 4-bet? Why not just call? Well, whenever your hand is offsuit, it's going to play worse post-flop than suited hands, which is why you see ace-10 suited calling every time, but ace-10 offsuit 3-betting every time. You don't want to 3-bet ace-10 suited and get 4-bet because it's a roughly break-even scenario. But with ace-10 offsuit, if you 3-bet and then get 4-bet, you can just easily fold. So this is what you want to be doing in position in general. 3-betting with your best hands and then some hands that are on the cusp of playability. Also notice, by the way, a lot of hands that you may think are good enough to call on the button are folding. Many players with 9-8 offsuit, ace-7 offsuit, jack-4 suited, jack-4 offsuit for some people. Some players opt to call with these hands when they are on the button against an initial raise, but that is a big mistake. You're going to be losing little bits of equity every single time you call with a non-playable hand that is listed very clearly here on this chart. If your opponent is overly loose and overly splashy, perhaps you can call a little bit wider with hands like 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, 10-8 suited, pocket 3s, pocket 2s, 5-4 suited, stuff like that, the suited connected type hands. But you cannot get away with calling hands like ace-5 offsuit, king-6 offsuit, jack-7 offsuit. These hands are big losers, and calling these hands, even on the button against a cutoff raise, is not going to work out for you in the long run. What about from the small blind against a cutoff raise? Remember, you want to be 3-betting polarized from in position, but linearly from out of position. And as we see here, the hands in red that are 3-betting are just the majority of your very good hands. Notice, we're 3-betting something like 9s and better the majority of the time, ace-queen offsuit and better, and then a lot of good, strong, suited high card hands, as well as a few ace-x suiteds. And when you're out of position, you need to 3-bet with a very strong range to begin with, but a linear range of just your best hands plus some hands that are good but non-overly premium. Because what's going to happen a lot of the time is the in-position player is going to feel inclined to call. And if they're going to feel inclined to call because they're in position, you want to make sure that you have very good post-flop playability, which is why you see you're 3-betting with just good hands. You want to be 3-betting with hands that crush your opponent's in-position calling range. And this same pattern applies when you are in the big blind. I'll show you that in just a second. Notice from the small blind, though, you do not get to call the raise with hands like jack-10 offsuit, king-7 suited, 10-6 suited, pocket 3s even. You don't get to call a whole lot in general from the small blind because when there's an initial raise from the button and then you call, the big blind has the option to call as well. And then on the flop, you're going to check, the big blind's going to check, the initial raiser is going to continuation bet very frequently. And then you have to figure out what you're going to do before you know what the big blind's going to do. And sometimes the big blind's going to be sitting there with a very strong hand, which is not good for you at all. So you'll see that the hands that opt to call from the small blind have very good post-flop playability for the most part. Ace-X suited, some suited Broadway hands, and some pairs. These hands are very, very good. And on the flop, you're going to know if you have a good hand or not. So you don't really care if you play the pot 3 ways. Otherwise, you're mostly 3-betting from the small blind. From the big blind, now you get to have a wider calling range because if the cutoff raises, the button folds and the small blind folds, well, now you're closing the action and you're getting okay odds. So now you get to call wider. However, if you look at the 3-betting range, it is still mostly linear. A lot of your best hands, good, strong, suited connected hands, plus a few suited aces and suited connectors mixed in there as well, but not a whole lot of them. Again, notice, even in the big blind, against a cutoff raise, you don't get to call with all sorts of nonsense. That's a big mistake a lot of people make. So you're going to find that in general, before the flop, you're probably going to want to 3-bet more often and perhaps fold more often than you are used to. Playing closer to a strong game theory optimal strategy before the flop is going to go a long way to making sure you get to the flop with reasonable ranges, which will help you play post-flop far better. Speaking of post-flop, a big thing that you want to make sure you do is that you need to stop paying off tight players. Many players simply do not bluff for large amounts of money. They do not do it at the small stakes. They're deathly afraid of losing the 100 big blinds or 200 big blinds that they have in front of them. So when they do put in a lot of money, you need to get out of the way unless you have a very, strong hand. Anytime a tight, straightforward opponent bets on all 3 betting rounds, you should fold most of your bluff catchers, or maybe all of your bluff catchers. To be clear, a bluff catcher is a hand that loses to all of your opponent's value hands and beats all of your opponent's bluffs. So, for example, top pair bad kicker is a hand that is often a bluff catcher if your opponent bets the flop and the turn and the river, because they will not value bet with a hand worse than top pair bad kicker. Now, if they'll value bet middle pair and bottom pair and all of that, then you can't go around folding top pair. But if they're only going to bet perhaps top pair, top kicker, and better on the flop and turn and river, well, your hand is now a bluff catcher, and you should be folding your bluff catchers against players who do not bluff at all or very often in general. For example, imagine you raise with King 10 from the button. Pretty good hand. And the big blind, a tight, straightforward player, calls. Flop comes King Jack 8. It's a pretty good flop for you. They check, you continuation bet, and then they raise you. Already, you should not be loving this scenario, because on King Jack 8, what are they really raising for value? Well, they're going to be raising 2 pair, King Jack, King 8, pocket 8s, King Queen, maybe King 9, maybe King 7, and then maybe some draws. That's reasonable even for a tight, straightforward player. Say the turn, well, say you call their flop check raise, and then the turn brings any other card. If they keep betting, especially if they use a large bet, you should strongly consider folding immediately on the turn against a tight, straightforward player, because a lot of tight, straightforward players are not going to keep value betting worse kings, worse top pairs on the turn. If they did check raise with King 3 on King Jack 8, and the turn's a 2, they're often not going to keep blasting it. Let's say you do decide to call anyway. Say the river's any other card, and they bet big again. Now, you pretty much always need to fold, unless you think your opponent's going to take a draw on King Jack 8, like Queen 10, 10 9, etc. Check raise it on the flop, bet the turn, blast the river. If they're not going to be doing that, then you have an easy fold. But I see it time and time and time again. Players call in this situation because they think, well, I could have the best hand, but you're almost never going to have the best hand. Stop paying off the tight players. Get rid of your need to know that you made the right play. Get your ego out of there. Speaking of getting your ego out of there, you need to make a point to stay sane. Many players get mad when expected, common events occur. For example, say you get it all in with pocket aces before the flop and you lose. You get unlucky. A lot of players get mad and angry and tilted, and they go off the deep end and lose all their money. But just because they get mad when they lose in a scenario where they know they're going to lose, let's say 18% of the time, that does not mean that you have to. So many players model their strategy and thought processes off of the same strategies and thought processes that their small stakes losing opponents have. You should not think that the right way to go about thinking about poker and playing poker is to copy the players who cannot beat the small stakes games. That is not what you want to do. Instead, you want to be trying to replicate how the best high stakes winners are playing and thinking, because they have things figured out. You're going to find that pretty much no good, strong, high stakes player gets mad when they get unlucky, because getting unlucky happens. When you get it all in with the aces, you are going to lose 18% of the time. You are supposed to lose 18% of the time. And once you recognize that and understand that, when you do lose, you realize, okay, this was my 18%. Who cares? Do not go on tilt. It's very, 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 very bad. When you make better decisions than your opponents, you make money. When you don't, you lose money. So stay sane and watch them get mad over all sorts of nonsense and let all these things just, roll off your back. It's okay. Say you are sitting at the table and you're playing and the dealer flips up a card that would have been in your hand and you would have had a good hand. Some people get mad at that. It's random though. Sometimes dealers mess up. It's okay. They're human. It happens. Sometimes the cocktail waitress will walk by and spill a drink right on your head. Should you get mad? No. It's going to happen sometimes. Not very often, but it's going to happen sometimes. Say you get pocket aces all in 3 times in a row before the flop, and you know the game's not rigged, and you lose all 3 in a row. Should you get mad? No. It happens. Get used to it. It's okay. These things are normal. I think a lot of people don't realize how variance works, and you got to realize that even if things are kind of unlikely to happen, sometimes they are going to happen back to back to back. And when that does occur, It's okay. It's normal. Just sit there, stay sane, and continue playing excellent poker. My final tip for today is to keep a proper bankroll. A lot of people get mad when they lose with their aces 3 times in a row because they only have 3 buy-ins to their name. If you lose all of your money, I get how that would be detrimental and would cause mental anguish. Instead, you need to keep a proper bankroll. Even if you have a large win rate, like 10 big blinds per hour in live 1 to no limit, you will need roughly 3,000 big blinds in your bankroll to never go broke. That's about $6,000. You may say, but I don't have $6,000. If you have a job and you have other income coming in besides exactly poker, some of that money that's going to come in, if you can partition that to your poker bankroll, can be counted as your poker bankroll, even if you do not have it yet, because you know you're going to be getting it in the future. That said, if you do want to make a point to not go broke, or have at least a very tiny chance of going broke, you are going to need something like $6,000 set aside for 1 to no limit. If your win rate is smaller than 10 big blinds per hour because, well, you're not a strong poker player yet, you're going to need a larger bankroll. Because, well, if your win rate is less, you will naturally need a bigger bankroll because you'll have bigger swings. Also, if the rake is very high in your particular game, you may find that having a 10 big blind per hour win rate is not possible. If that's the case, again, you're going to need a bigger bankroll. Recognize that poker is a great way to get rich slowly. Take your time, keep a proper bankroll, stay sane, play better than your opponents, make better decisions than them, and the money will flow your direction in the long run. Do not be in a rush. A lot of people think that they need to get rich immediately. And to be fair, poker can give you the chance to get rich immediately. If you take $200, double it to $400, move up to $2,500, take your $400, turn it into $2,000 on a good run of cards, then move up to $510, turn that $2,000 into $15,000. There you go. We're off to the races. But it doesn't happen very often. Instead, sit there, play 1 to no limit, and grind out your $20 per hour. You make an entire buy-in, 100 big blinds, $200 in only 10 hours of play. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good win rate. You're going to find that if you can keep a 10 big blind per hour win rate, you will be able to naturally and safely, in terms of bankroll management, move up to 2.5 relatively quickly. Put your butt in the chair, play a lot, and grind your way up. And then from there, move up to 5.10. And then from there, move up to 10.20 and just keep going. At the end of the day, volume cures variance. If you play a lot of hands, the variance will become irrelevant. So, keep a proper bankroll. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a quick favor. Click the like and subscribe button down below. Also, check out the rest of the videos that My Poker Coaching has. And also, if you want to help out the other people who are watching here, if you have any other major tip to help at 1 to no limit, type it in the comments section below. We would appreciate it. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And I'll talk to you next time.